off to go with you to Disneyland. And it was a very important message, and as important learning was, but spending time with the family is also important, and that would have been an opportunity. I wasn't there, so I didn't go to Disneyland. But we see that sometimes my father's world, learning was important, but spending time with the family is also very important. So that's why I feel it's important on the Yarhzeit, yes, to take time to follow the minhag Eretz Yisrael, to go with my family on the Tzios. I do it in the afternoon. So I'd like to speak about, I've tried in the past to discuss his Torah, is to speak about what my father once said about Koheles. We know that on Sukkot, Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkot, or in Chutz La'aretz, on Shmini Atzeres, or in Eretz Yisrael, the first day of Sukkot, depending when Shabbos falls out, the custom is to recite Koheles. Now, Koheles is actually a very interesting, the custom minute to recite Koheles is very interesting because the custom to recite Koheles is actually not mentioned in Chazal. Megillas Esther, we know, of course, is a chiyuv in Divrei Kabbalah. Eicha, Rus, Shir Hashirim, that's mentioned in the Sefer Sofrim to recite those Megillot. And Megillas Koheles is not mentioned in Chazal at all. As a matter of fact, when the Shulchan Aruch mentions that we should recite the Chamesh Megillos in the various holidays, there's a machlokes whether or not, besides Megillas Esther, we go ahead and we recite a bracha. There's machlokes. The minhag in America in Chutz La'aretz, I believe, actually I don't know, but the minhag in Chutz La'aretz, I believe, is not to recite a bracha in almost all places, and the minhag in Eretz Yisrael in many places is to go ahead and is to recite a bracha. However, the post can point out that even that in the days before the time of the Vilna Gaon, so no one recited the bracha Megillas Koheles, because Megillas Koheles is not mentioned in Chazal. That's a minhag that happened elsewhere. The minhag Hagra, Shitas Hagra, was to say a bracha on Koheles also, and for that reason, there is Israel we make a bracha. Many shuls will make a bracha on Koheles and recite it to Shabbos and Shul. But that's not mentioned. That's not mentioned by Chazal, which is why there's a discussion. Why is Koheles read on Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkot? So the Magen Avraham points out that the reason why we recite Koheles on Shabbos Chol Hamoed Sukkot is because the pasuk says, "U'lesimcha mazu." So what does simcha accomplish? And since it's samach paseinu, so we recite Koheles, which in itself begs the question that if it's a time of simcha, the last sefer I'd want to hear about is Megillas Koheles, because Megillas Koheles basically says there's no such thing as simcha. You shouldn't be happy. So we have to understand why. In other words, you can give me other reasons why. You might want to say, it's an important message for life. We just went through the harvest. But to tell me that since Sukkot is devoted to Simcha, so we recite Koheles, which discusses Simcha, it requires explanation because Koheles basically points out that maybe a person should not be too happy. And that's the question which I would like to focus on today. My father, when he discussed Megillas Koheles, so he pointed out Gemara Masechah Shabbos. Gemara Masechah Shabbos, Daf Lavan and Abeis, and we know that in the time when they were Koveya, what's in the Tanakh? So there's a whole discussion which Svarim should be in Tanakh, which Svarim should not be in Tanakh. And one of the Svarim which was questioned whether it should be included in the Tanakh was Sefer Koheles. And as a matter of fact, the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos says, Amar Yehuda brother of Shmuel, that Bikshu Chachamim Likno Sefer Koheles. The Chachamim wanted to put Sefer Koheles into Geniza. Why they want to put it into Geniza? So you would ask me, I would have said, put Sefer Koheles in Geniza because basically the Sefer Koheles, using this expression, takes all the fun out of life, right? It's not, Sefer Koheles says everything, he says, what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, Dvarim Sosrim Zeh. Again, because the words of Koheles and the Gemara and Ibn Ezra actually explain, you'll find different sukkim that contradict one another in Sefer Koheles. And therefore, because it contradicts one of the Svarim in Sefer Koheles, the Chazal the Chachamim did not want to include this, and Asher Zadol did not want to include this in the canon in Tanakh. Why not? So I think because the bottom line is that Tanakh, Torah, and Nevi'im, Ksuvim is supposed to be a way of life. Okay, the word Torah comes from the word Hora'ah, or maybe vice versa. That gives a psak, how we live our lives. And that's how we have to see the Torah, Nevi'im, and the Ksuvim, right, are not, Torah for sure, but the Nevi'im and Ksuvim are not just stories, the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim are also, guides for us how to live our life. And if you have a Sefer where there are contradictions which abound in the Sefer, how can we include that in the Tanakh? Okay, so that's what the Gemara says. So then the Gemara asks the question on the Ablam and Abayz. So he says, so that's the case. Why do they include it? It's a good question. How can you include in the Tanakh a book where there are just contradictions through and through the Sefer? So the Gemara says, because why? They should chiloso divrei Torah, the sofa divrei Torah, because the beginning is Torah and the end is Torah. And my father pointed out that it doesn't mean, well, since the first pasuk is Torah and the last pasuk is Torah, so that means, okay, so the rest of the book doesn't make sense, but it's okay. Well, we have one pasuk at the beginning, one pasuk at the end, and we can just be included in the Tanakh. It says no. It says, because the first pasuk is Torah, the second pasuk, last pasuk is Torah, it shows that the whole Sefer Koheles is Torah also. And maybe what Pshat in the Gemara is that the first pasuk guides us how to live our life, and the last pasuk guides us how to live life, it's Torah, right? And therefore, from those two psukim itself, we can understand what the rest of the book is talking about, and how the rest of the book also, even if it's contradictions, right? But there's contradictions, somehow or another can go ahead and can can guide us, and we can resolve the contradictions. Now, the Chazal themselves, in the Gemara there, mention some of the contradictions, and they resolve it. Okay. However, when they resolve it, they sort of steer away from the Pashup Pshat, from the simple Pshat. However, my father mentioned some of the steers, the contradictions, and he did not veer away from the simple Pshat in the Koheles. He actually stuck. He tried to stick to Pshat. So for example, so he says there's a pasuk in Koheles, Tov Kas Mischok. Okay, Tov Kas Mischok means better to get angry than to laugh, because unfortunately sometimes laughter can be very destructive. And even though anger is Kol Koskil Avodah Zarah, Tov Kas Mischok. Now the way Chazal explained it, that when our Kadosh Baruch Hu shows anger at us and then we correct our ways, so then we end up benefiting in the end. However, there's another pasuk which says Mischok Amarta Zemuhulo. Right? So when my father translated it, Pshat, to laugh, to say holeless, that can be praiseworthy. Sometimes it's praiseworthy to laugh. Okay, now, sometimes it's praiseworthy to laugh. Now, before I move on, and we'll explain this a little bit later, for those who were close to my father in the last kuf of his life, in the last kuf of his life, we're talking about from the time that, let's say, I was 9, after his stroke. So they'll know that my father felt that laughter is very important. Why? Because my father, when he had the stroke, so he lost, everyone remembers, he lost sensation on the left side of his body. And he used to say, you could put a blowtorch to my left hand, I wouldn't feel it. And then a few months later, sensation came back with a vengeance. And for a certain amount of time, it was very difficult for my father, because the pain was unbearable. As a matter of fact, I remember once that on Shabbos, after the stroke, when he wasn't able to go to shul, a lot of the Talmidim would come to visit him on Shabbos. Now, I remember one time, he was actually very upset about the pain and was complaining about it. So I remember Rav Micha Gruber said to him, Rebbe, it's so not like you to complain, right? So my father mentioned the Gemara Maseches Brachos. Gemara Maseches Brachos mentions that Rav Yehuda Anossi, all the Chachmei Chazal, lo mi duvshech, lo mi ukseich, I don't want the pain, I don't want the honey, I don't want the reward. He says, what pshat? Mentioned Marsha says, how could they complain? Because they can deal with pain as long as they are able to learn Torah. Once they can't learn Torah, right, they can't deal with the pain. And that's what my father felt. Anyway, so, and you take painkillers as a side effect, it's hard to function. So at that time, there was a write-up about Norman Cousins. Norman Cousins was the editor of the Saturday Night Washington Post Review, I think, right? And who had gone through a very painful illness, and he basically was able to heal himself. Laughter and other and other means. Okay, laughter. And my father said, okay, So we have to go ahead. He said, I have to work on laughing. Okay? I work on laughing, okay? And, and I remember that, so my father said, people laugh, they watch movies. The problem was that my father was such a deep person that he didn't understand laughter in the movies. I remember once my nephews were sitting there watching, I don't know, it was the Three Stooges, it was Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, and they were laughing so much. My father says, I wish I could laugh like them. I wish. I don't know what they're laughing at. I don't understand it. I wish I could laugh. But laughter was important. So he says, but on the other hand, the Pasuk says that Tov Chatz Mischok. Okay, then happiness. Shabbat and it's a simcha. I praise happiness. All right? Anyone who went into my father's house, at least the house before he passed away, would know that there was a picture on the wall of my father in a coat. Someone snapped as he walked in the door. A big smile on his face. I don't know if anyone remembers that picture, but I still see that picture in my mind. On the other hand, there's another pasuk. He says, "L'simcha maza osa." What does simcha do? Simcha is worthless. Like, what does simcha do? Right? Simcha. He says simcha, and then one more. Okay, I have to be very careful. Okay, with this, we'll start off. He says, we will start off with the pasuk which praises. Okay, my father mentioned this. Koheles Perek Tes Pasuk Tes. Re'ei, he says, Re'ei Chayim Im Isha Sherahavta. Look at life of your wife you love. Okay, all your life. Ki hu chelkacha b'chayim uve melcha shirata amal tachas hashemesh. So the pasuk praises marriage. On the other hand, okay, I'm just quoting the pasuk. In Perek Zayin pasuk Chavav says, "Umotzeh marmi mabes the isha shir mitzodim." I find more bitter than death the lady, right? As a matter of fact, in Mesachas Brachas, the Gemara would say when a person got married, they would say matzah or motzi. What is matzah isha matzah tov or matzah isha marmi mabes? So you have a contradiction there in Sefer Koheles. So how do we deal with these contradictions in the Sefer Koheles? How do we understand it? And my father, in his classical way, and this is something which he mentioned the pasuk which we say every day, says either elevate a person, right, or marriage can bring a person down. Depends what the perspective on marriage is. Is marriage about me, or is marriage about giving? Is marriage about giving to people? I have to just quote actually my mother, okay, on this idea. That my mother once told me an idea that the Gemara at the end of Mesechus Gittin says. Now, for all those who knew my parents, I didn't see anyone that's shocked about it, the fact that I quoted my mother, okay? A few years ago, I quoted my mother at Simcha Shoeva, and people were like, wow, he's quoting his mother, okay? So he said, he's quoting his mother. So he says, the Gemara says in Mesechus Gittin that a person who is Megarish Ishta Rishona, the Mizbeach is Morid the Ma'os. The Mizbeach cries. So I don't know how this came up. So my mother said to me, do you know why the Mizbeach is Morid the Ma'os? Because the Mizbeach represents sacrifices. And a lot of times when there's a divorce, someone doesn't want to sacrifice. They don't want to give in a little bit on one thing or a little bit on something else. And that's why I'm saying, sometimes, okay, there's a reason for it. But sometimes, a lot of times, it started because people just didn't want to sacrifice. They didn't understand the idea of the Mizbeach. And that's why the Mizbeach is Morid the most. And therefore, marriage has to elevate a person to realize they have to give, they have to sacrifice. That's how we make the brachos of Kedushin, the brachos and the Suin, because the point of marriage is to elevate. And that's what my father explained. He says, when a person goes ahead and a person gets married. So yes, if he sees as marriage only about himself, what he can get out of it, so a person sees marriage as something where he's there to give, right? To give up, to sacrifice, to give to the world, to give to his wife, to give to his family. At that point, we would say, Rei Chaimi Isha, he says, this is your chelik in life. And then when it comes to simcha, same when it comes to simcha. It says, what's the idea of simcha? Simcha also, there are different types of simcha. If simcha is a question of, just I want to be happy, I want to enjoy myself. Want to enjoy myself? Yes. So then then at that point, when we go ahead and we say, L'simcha mazu osa. But a shapachta is a simcha, a different type of simcha. We'll talk about it in a second. That type of simcha is a simcha. That type of simcha is a simcha which elevates, and that's a very, very special simcha. And my father's idea when it came to simcha was, what does simcha mean? Be very careful. Simcha means that you feel you're accomplishing something. That's the true simcha. The true simcha is you feel you're accomplishing. When a person feels like they accomplish in life, that's the true simcha. And he always mentioned the Rambam in Hilchos Yontif. The Rambam in Hilchos Yontif says that when a person is sameach with one of neveso, and he just invites his family, and no one else, is invited. He closes the door, and he has all the meat and all the wine and everything else he does to Mesameach. So that's the Rambam says that's not simcha. That's not simchas yontif. That's simchas kreisa. That's the simcha of his stomach. What does that mean? Because if a person thinks that the point of eating meat and drinking wine is to be Mesameach, he missed the point. The point of eating meat and drinking wine, the point of simcha is to understand, to realize, how much you go ahead and what you go ahead and what you accomplish in life. That's what's important. And small accomplishments, big accomplishments, that's the idea of simcha. And that kind of simcha is actually a very, very important simcha. And we also have to think, well, what am I accomplishing? What am I accomplishing? What am I doing? If you think about it, you wonder that, when you come to a wedding, and what's the simcha that the parents are feeling? And the parents are feeling a very, very special simcha, I remember once my father said to me, I was in fourth grade, fifth grade. I asked him a question: why is it that parents are allowed to go to a wedding of their child during Avelis? And he said to me, because he says, for everybody else at the wedding, what's mesameach them is the music, the food, the ambiance. But for parents and grandparents, he told me, parents and grandparents, there's something very special going on. You take away all the music, you take away all the food, right? You take away the ambiance. There's still a lot of simcha going on. Why? Because the parents realize they actually accomplished something. They brought a child to chuppah. What can be greater? What can be greater than bring a child to simcha? That's simcha, and that's the kind of simcha which we say, Shabbat isn't simcha. We talk about one last example, we talk about laughter. What laughter? Yes, because sometimes when so if laughter is something which, causes a person to escape reality, not take life seriously, right? Then that's a problem. That's a problem. Someone doesn't take life seriously. That's a problem. He says, but if laughter helps a person get over the bumps and helps a person, deal with the problems, then we can say, and then at that point we're able to schek. According to my father, translated, wow, this is praiseworthy because it helps you. It helps you get through the bumps in life. And not just a story. I remember that as my parents were getting to go older, I was known as the Ben Zakunim. So I had the schus of being the only child in the house at some points. And I remember when I would come home sometimes from yeshiva at night, or come home rather late, my parents would be up. I would always go into the bedroom to speak to them. Very, very special moments. And the truth is, what do we talk about? We should joke around, right? And I remember one very special story. I think some of the culprits are present here in the audience, okay? And it was actually Erev Yom Kippur. I forgot which year it was, but it was in. And I had said I had a chavrusa then, and I used to learn until 12 o'clock, and I said, I don't feel it's Yom Kippur. I want to go home to sleep, right? I want to go sleep early. So I must stop 11:15, 11:30, and he said, yeah. I also. Chavrusa said to me also. He says, I want to. I have to go home early too. And I went upstairs, and I was talking to my parents, and all of a sudden, 11:45 at night, the doorbell rings. If anyone who remembers the story before I go into what happened, doorbell rings, right? And all of a sudden, my mother goes, "Who's there?" And my father, if anyone said father, all of a sudden, in a very nervous kind of way, like, who would be ringing the doorbell at 11:45? Remember, he said to me, "Chaim, please answer. Be careful. You never know who it is, right?" I'm very worried. So I go downstairs, and it was my friends from yeshiva, from Yeshiva's verse, decided to surprise me. You were my birthday, right? You remember, right? My birthday, right? And I come upstairs, and my parents are laughing because they pulled one over they finally pulled one over me. It's okay to laugh. If help is there to escape from reality, that's a problem. My father pointed out. He always quoted, Hillel said, and I'm here, everyone's here. Well, Hillel was so focused on himself, he says, no, he says, if I come to the Shoeva and I come with all my issues, all my problems, and I'm happy, then everything's here. But if I leave my problems behind, then I got nothing out of this simcha Shoeva. That's the idea. So, in other words, when you look at Koheles seems very depressing at certain points and contradictory. But what's the idea? The idea is that it depends how you use life. If you use life in the proper way, it's uplifting, it's elevating. If you use life in an improper way, then it's in no way, then it can be very, very destructive. And that's what the Gemara says. Doesn't mean that because the first pasuk is Divrei Torah and the last pasuk is Divrei Torah, so all of a sudden we have to include the whole sefer. No, chas v'shalom. It means because of the first pasuk and the last pasuk, then we know how to explain the whole sefer. What's the first pasuk at the very beginning? Ma yisram la'adam b'chol amal ishmal tachas hashemesh. What's the point? What's the point of working underneath the sun? He says, Tachas Hashemesh. But with Mei Hashemesh, before the Shemesh, that's okay. What's with Mei Hashemesh, the Torah, right? In other words, if everything you do, you're accomplishing to live life of Torah, then that's okay. Then there's another pasuk which Gemara does not mention, which you forgot to mention. Havel Havel and Markos Havel Havel Hakol Havel. So the father used to say, how do you transfer Havel Havolim? Nothing of nothing. No. It's vapor of vapor, steam of steam, right? Vapor of vapor. You say vapor of vapor. You used to say vapor because vapor. You can actually create energy, certain type of vapor. You can do something with it. If you don't do anything with it, then it's nothing. It's sort of like depends what you do with something. He used to mention the story about Rav Solanter, and there are different Gersos in the story, and I forgot how he mentioned it. But let's say there was I saw it actually written down in his handwriting. There was a certain person who, Rav Solanter came to visit a student of his. Rav Solanter had a student who was very knowledgeable in secular knowledge. And Rav Solanter was showing him off. Everything he could do. Rav Solanter said, says you take a bunch of zeros. What are 10 zeros? What is the value of 10 zeros? The value of 10 is 0. You put a 1 in front of it, and all of a sudden it has a lot of value. Same thing. All the things are so good as long as the 1. Depends how you go ahead and you use it. And what's the last pasuk in Koheles to end? Sota var hakol nishmat l'kim yarei v'misasav shemar kizekol adam. We think about that. Then we'll be able to use everything that we have properly, and then life will be very elevating. And when I think about I think everyone knows, understood my father. My father's life was a life of integration, of sort of integrating the world out around us with the world of Torah, right? And not to ignore the world around us. But it's really all about using the world around us in a proper way. And that's really Sefer Koheles. Now, coming back to the original question, so how Magen Avraham says we learn Koheles because the Simcha Zuma says. The question is, why would you learn Koheles on a holiday Simcha? Because the message of Koheles is how to use the Simcha. We have to use the Simcha of Sukkot to elevate and lift us, and that's why it's important to go ahead and to. That's why it's important to go ahead and to. That's why it's important to go ahead and to learn Koheles, to understand how to use the Simcha properly. So the Simcha will uplift us, the Tzchok will uplift us, and make us better people, and help us deal with life in a much more efficient and better manner. And that's a lesson. That's a very important lesson. And I think that when I think about my father, everything in life he likes to see. He likes to say, he was able to use the uplift. I just want to mention one more story that I thought about this year. I was listening to a shiur somebody was giving. It doesn't make a difference who it was. And he made a comment about how it's difficult. A lot of times, he's learning at night, he's doing a very complicated sugya. He gets very frustrated. And he goes to eat something in the freezer, the refrigerator, he finds a piece of cake, and cake's not even, takes a little piece, and by the time he's finished the cake. And I was thinking, I said, it's an amazing, amazing thing. that I never saw my father eat